Chagwan, Xi Jinping wants to be both loved and feared by China's people. The coronavirus may change that. If censors in communist-led regime are good for anything, is spurring creativity. With the new coronavirus stalking China, Chinese netizens have been heaping praise on Chernobyl, an American-made TV drama about the Soviet Union's worst nuclear disaster. The aim is to sneak discussion of the virus of onto China's tightly policed internet. In less hectic times, censors would stamp out such impertinence, or swiftly stamp out. For the parallels with the reactor explosion in 1986 and the official cover-up that followed are painful for China's Communist Party bosses, whose system of government is cribbed from Soviet designs. But pointed comparisons keep popping up on China's social media. One urges Chinese viewers to learn from Chernobyl that a free flow of information would be more would offers more security than aircraft carriers, moon landings, and any signs of superpower might. Another contrast, soothing interview granted to state media by the governor of Wuhan, where the epidemic began, with the speech by the hero of Chernobyl, a Soviet scientist, about the cost of the official lies. Parallels are likely to continue in the real world. Back in the 1980s, Kremlin leaders scapegoated local officials and engineers, coolly blaming them for the disaster, and denying a wider cover up. In recent days, Chinese state media have dropped heavy hints that the mayor of Wuhan, where the industrial city where the virus was first detected, will lose his job. When Li Keqiang, China's prime minister, was appointed to oversee the epidemic virus control work, cynics suggested that his role is to take the fall should the outbreak spark a pandemic, in effect to protect President Xi Jinping. As it happens, censors should be relieved that Chinese netizens are focusing on the ills of Soviet collective leadership. It would be more dangerous if online critics were to start exploring a historical parallel closer to home, namely the way that in Chinese history, natural disasters undermined an emperor's claim to rule. More than one dynasty fell after catastrophes signaled that heaven had withdrawn its favor. It was not only seen as inaptitude when a ruler was unable to protect his people from floods or famine, or as in the 2nd century during the Han Dynasty, from repeated outbreaks of disease, probably smallpox and measles, that killed perhaps a third of the population. Such bungling showed that the emperor lacked virtue and deserved to be overthrown, people said. Modern day Chinese may not believe that a rampaging coronavirus signals divine anger with Mr. Xi. Still, the Xi party has a great deal at stake in the crisis, precisely because large claims are made about his wisdom, which is now taught in schools and studied by party members, as Xi Jinping thought. Every day, state media credit Mr. Xi with personally guiding China to ever greater prosperity, modernity, and global clout. No leader has amassed such individual power since Mao Zedong, or been so lavishly praised. Chinese intellectuals accuse Mr. Xi of claiming the mantle of an emperor. They point to Mr. Xi's speeches praising Chinese traditional culture and lauding codes of morality and deference to imperial authority as handed down by Confucius and other sages. The result is an awkward hybrid. On the one hand, officials make claims about the efficiency of collective party leadership that would be familiar to any Soviet apparatchik. To them, insurgencies sweeping the West are proof that a multi-party system and a free press and democratic accountability are sources of chaos and deep dysfunction. As they describe it, China's system is a meritocracy that selects highly competent experts to run the country with a track record of correcting their own mistakes. Yet at the same time, the party's propagandists lay claim to a very different form of legitimacy, involving people's love for and trust in Mr. Xi. So sweeping is the praise of him that it essentially leaves no room for the idea that Mr. Xi could make a serious mistake. This convoluted claim to legitimacy can be heard in the context of the current coronavirus outbreak, as leaders insist that their system of government is suited to tackling the outbreak. On January 28th, China leaders hosted the head of the World Health Organization, or WHO, a UN body that played an invaluable role in demanding transparency in 2003 after China's initial cover-up of the extent of an outbreak of severe acute respiratory syndrome, or SARS, which led to many avoidable deaths. Wang Yi, the foreign minister, assured the WHO's boss, Tedros, that China would be more resolute this time thanks to the strong leadership of the Party Central Committee with the comrade Xi Jinping at the core and the strong advantages of the socialist system as well as experiences of the SARS. Unaccountable even to heaven. It's too simplistic to assume that all bad things that happen in China must harm Mr. Xi. The virus outbreak could end swiftly amid the worldwide praise for the bravery of China's doctors and nurses, the self-discipline of the public, and the resolve of Chinese leaders, albeit after a slow start. If the crisis does not end well, scapegoats will be found and underlings punished. That alone would not have to shake Mr. Xi's authority, as it can always be shored up with the repression, ideological discipline, and nationalist propaganda. But a botched response to the virus would lay bare tensions inherent in the party's hybrid claim to legitimacy. Mr. Xi's China is two things at once. It is a secretive, techno-authoritarian, one-party state ruled by gray men in unaccountable councils and secretive committees. It also claims to be a nation-sized family headed by a patriarch of unique wisdom and virtue in a secular 21st century version of the mandate of heaven. If forced to choose between those competing models, bet on cold, bureaucratic control to win out. Before Mr. Xi and his team learn their own lesson from the Soviet Union's fall, 5 years after the Chernobyl disaster. Expressions of public love for Mr. Xi, the people's leader are all very well, but keeping power is what counts.